The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
Here.
McCoy?
Here.
Shelton?
Here.
Sitnikow? Warren?
Here.
Vandenhoevel?
Here.
Right, 6 board members are present. At this point, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
I move that the board convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren F, persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons except where par paren B applies, which, if discussed in public, would likely have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, and were pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, to wit, report of policy violations, investigation regarding a board member, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, deliberation of a new superintendent contract. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Second. Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 6-0. We'll convene across the hall. I'd entertain a motion to reconvene in open session.
I move that the board reconvene in open session in room 331 pursuant to section 19.95, paren 2, Wisconsin statute to consider the balance of the special board meeting agenda.
I would also like to note that all 7 board members are present, and we're also joined at the table by our superintendent, Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, to my left, our board secretary, Sandy Heller, and our 2 intra-city student council members, Luke Pisani from Southwest, and Grace Schumacher from East. And at this time, I would entertain a motion under new superintendent contract. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. I need a second on the reconvene to open session motion. Second. Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye. Carried 7-0. Now I'd entertain a motion under new superintendent contract.
I move that Stephen Murley be offered a contract to serve as the next superintendent of the Green Bay Area Public School District.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Rhonda?
I'd like to make a motion to open the floor for public comment on this motion on the table.
I don't think we can legally.
I second.
Jeff, can you come up to the table, please? Actually, up there would work. And then you know how to use the microphone? Do you know how to use the microphone?
I can figure it out.
There you go.
I think I figured it out. You don't have a notice for public comment. So
Oh, sorry.
No, he just has to not push it.
fair enough.
Right, we don't have it noticed for public comment, so it's not automatically open for public comment. But that's why we're making a motion to open the floor, just like city council would. They don't notice, city council opens the floor, it's a suspension of the rules, is it not?
Whether that would be the case under normal procedures or not, your policy specifically says for special sessions, if you're going to have public comment, it has to be noticed. And you didn't notice it for this special session, therefore, unless you had noticed it, then you could do that. But as a practical matter, I think from an open meeting standpoint too, this is obviously a matter of significant public interest. There has been, over the course of the last, let's say, 6 months, dozens of opportunities or communications about community interaction relative to this topic. So I think if you are going to have further public input on the topic at tonight's meeting, it absolutely would have to be noticed just under a general open meetings analysis. But that's not even necessary because your policy requires that you have notice for special session in the event that you're going to have public comment.
So we're gonna have, I regret now that this wasn't put, in open as circumstances have it here, because we're scheduling this open forum, there will be an open forum at the beginning of the work sessions, 5 minutes after we're done with this. And I guess if this had been later, people would have had the opportunity to talk about anything they wanted at the open forum, including this. And so it seems like I don't like the idea that on a technicality, we're not allowing public comment here when there would have been an open forum. And we have talked as a board about how we would generally not post an employment matter as something as open for comment in the course of the agenda, but also that the open forum's available in a normal situation, and that if someone discusses something in open forum, that we reserve the right to go into closed session if they delve into closed session territory, and I believe we've made arrangements to allow for that. It just, to stop people, to not suspend the rules here, and then have an open forum immediately after we vote is just a very strange thing to do.
I have a question.
Rhonda.
Can you refresh our memory about which policy you're referring to?
Well, like I said, the policy is that's your policy, and it's a 187 is the one I'm looking at, which refers to forums scheduled at the start of each work session and regular board meeting. This is neither of those the way it's been noticed. It's not a work session, it's not a regular board meeting, it's a special session. And then it says, excuse me, the board may determine to allow public comment during other portion of the board's meeting with proper notice under state and federal law. So under the policy, that's the way you guys have it set up. And while I understand what you're saying, Andrew, the reality is they're noticed as different meetings. And without getting too far afield from that reality, the other part of it is, again, from just an open meetings analysis, Our Supreme Court has made it very clear open meetings are not a technicality. They're an extremely important component of public governmental body behavior. And this is clearly an issue that is of public significance. And if there was going to be public comment, it almost certainly it should have been noticed.
So it says under policy 187, under suspension of the rules, D, suspension of the rules established for public participation may be accomplished either by a majority vote of the board or otherwise at the discretion of the presiding officer. Is this so? Just so to clarify, so that doesn't not apply right now, and that's in board policy 187.
So again, I think there's two things going on here, Rhonda. Number one, there's a policy. Right now, there was a motion to allow public comment. That was not a motion to suspend the rules. If that's what your motion was, that's fine. I would strongly encourage the board, however, to understand that you cannot suspend the rules in circumvention of Wisconsin open meetings law. You can suspend your own rules from a procedural standpoint as to what you're going to allow for comment, as to how many minutes somebody's going to be allowed, whatever your structure is for those comments, but you can't suspend rules to circumvent open meetings law. And ultimately, it's this board's decision whether or not they want to do that.
So for further clarification, when it says under implementation of this, public participation at school board meetings is the title of this policy. So suspension of rules is under D, so under implementation. So it does say suspension of the rules established for public participation. There's nothing noting time or any of those things you just brought up. So I just want to make sure that I understand, okay, that we are actually, there's no way possible out there right now that we would be able to make a motion to suspend the rules to open the floor. That's completely impossible.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still learning these things. I didn't mean to cut you off. Well, first of all, what is meant by rules, I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't view a structure that has a established expectation that particular types of board meetings are going to include public comment period as a rule. I would view that as a board's decision about how we're going to structure our meetings, and I would say that has to be noticed. Here,
Hold on, excuse me, but you would say that has to be noticed. I'm looking for certainty. And what I'm looking for is when we talk about suspension of the rules, it's in the board policy that relates to public participation at school board meetings. So I'm curious if it's listed under implementation of public participation, when would the D, suspension of rules, apply? When would we use that?
I don't know when you've used that. As my understanding is you never have. So I don't know what that is intended to accomplish. But that's why I said the policy is but one thing to me, and this is ultimately, as elected officials, your decision, because each and every one of you is responsible, individually liable or responsible for following open meetings law, not as a collective body, but as individuals participating in a meeting that is not being held consistent with open meetings law. And again, the law in this state is every public meeting must be noticed. Topics that will be handled at that meeting must be included in that notice. And whether or not a meeting provides sufficient notice as to the intended contents of the meeting is determined by whether or not the community has a reasonable expectation of being informed as to what's going to happen at that meeting, and taking into account the significance of the issues and public discussion or interest in the particular topic and so forth. And I'm telling you, you're not going to find anywhere that says this exact scenario recreated, this is the rule. But I'm telling you, having read these cases, that in a situation where it's the superintendent contract issue that's on the table, where there has been, I'm a parent in the district, so I've gotten emails upon emails upon emails about opportunities to participate in this process. And tonight was noticed simply as action on or new superintendent contract without any reference to public comment, that I think that would be viewed as a failure to fulfill the open meetings rule requirements.
And when I look at this policy that the board created around public participation at school board meetings, and I look under implementation, I look at that as, and D is suspension of rules. Suspension of the rules established for public participation may be accomplished either by a majority vote of the board or otherwise at the discretion of the presiding officer. When I think about what Andrew is referring to, and I've attended a lot of city council meetings in the last 5 to 6 years. I've watched this frequently done in their meetings. In their agendas, they don't note that, but they actually can decide to open the floor. And sometimes the vote would actually fail. And it could fail now if we did it. And we all know this, right? But I think it's important, you just speak to something significant. This is significant, right? This could be game changing even. And this is something that I feel I've been asked to bring this forward, and I was absolutely going to do that tonight. And that's what we're doing here. So I'm just trying to understand specifically if suspension of the rules under public participation in our own policies, which you noted in the beginning, right? I'm wondering when we would use this, and more importantly, why we wouldn't use it.
Well, I guess I would ask you, from your understanding as a board member, what rules have been established for public participation? Is it just that they will occur at these particular types of meetings, or are there other rules? I mean, you have, decorum, you have maybe topical constraints, so to speak.
We have-
how many minutes people can speak, those types of. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brenda.
No, that's minutes to speak. I was gonna, because we've suspended those rules before.
Sure. So I think there's typically a lot of rules that govern that public participation, component that I would say this is what is referred to here, because otherwise, again, in my opinion, that is contrary to Wisconsin law, and you can't suspend rules where the rule comes from a superior authority, which state law is.
So what are we, but we're talking about public comment on the posted item. Are you saying that your belief, your legal opinion is that under Wisconsin open meetings law, that the presence of public comment prior to the discussion of the superintendent hire makes it different? Makes it different than what was posted?
I'm not sure I completely follow your question, but let me put it this way. My opinion is not that this is specific to a superintendent contract or to public participation or public comment periods in general. Rather, it is a question of whether the public who has an interest in this issue and who has spent months providing public input on this process has a reasonable expectation that if further public comment is going to be taken, particularly given what your policy is, which is public forum or the public comment portion of meetings does not apply, generally speaking, to special sessions, that I would view that as a failure to inform the public, which is your duty as a board and as individual board members under the open meetings law.
And that's a fair statement. But I would ask, you referred to a law, that the open meetings law, that doesn't apply. Which law? When you're referring, you had just mentioned that there was a law, that there's an open meetings law that you're referring to, that if we were to, because we're not noticing this meeting, and we've definitely acknowledged that. So what we're trying to do is see if there's any possible way, and I'm looking at the policy, if we would be able to do this. And we know other government bodies do this, and I guess that's what I keep kind of going back to, is that I know that other government bodies do this. And I'm not sure why. I mean, we're in the same state, so I'm just wondering, right? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what it is, why we would not be able to at least take a roll call vote on this.
Well, first of all, I don't know what those notices say, so it's really hard. I mean, I haven't looked at those. I have seen notices, for example, that have a disclaimer or a proviso, if you will, on the bottom that say, note that the body may permit public comment on any particular agenda topic, something to that effect. So it's contemplated as a potentiality for that particular meeting. I'm not saying that's what the city council board notices say, I don't know. But there are ways to deal with that prospectively. Also, if there's a particular issue like this that is of interest where a board member, and obviously we have at least two, would want public comment, you have the opportunity to request and have the board president add that to the agenda 24 hours in advance. So that could have been done yesterday, afternoon, day before, whenever. I don't know when this agenda was first published, but there's, that's why you have that authority as a board member to put things on the agenda or, notice/agenda, which could have been done, like I said, yesterday by 6 p.m. Or I'm sorry, this is your. I'm taking over for you. You call people.
Laura?
Okay, so let's cut to the chase here a little bit. In your opinion, as an attorney who deals with this sort of thing all the time, will we be breaking the law if we allow public comment during this period?
I believe allowing public comment when it was not noticed would be in violation of the open meetings law, yes.
So we have a motion on the floor, and there's nothing, we can vote on the motion. You're just advising us that would be breaking the law to open it
Yeah, I
up.
mean, under parliamentary procedure, you have a couple, two options really. You're the presiding officer, so you can declare the motion out of order and not call for a vote. That's your call. In sort of defense or contrary or reaction to that, any member can call for a motion to call the question, which requires a 2/3 majority, and then there's a vote on the motion that sits. Or you can vote on the motion that sits, and if it passes, then members have to decide whether or not they're going to participate in the meeting and take that chance or not.
Laura?
So if we allow open forum, what are the ramifications? What are the possible legal ramifications of that?
Well, like I said, each and every one of you is in violation independently and subject to civil fines. I don't remember the exact amount. It's probably not huge, to be fair, but there's civil penalties associated with violating the open meetings law. And I suppose theoretically one could be charged with ethical violations, but that seems fairly remote.
Okay, so I'd like to withdraw my motion. But there is an opportunity, I just want to clarify. We have a public forum coming in the next potentially 15 minutes. So, and anything can be spoken to at that point.
Yeah, and I would say, Rhonda, oftentimes in dealing with these issues, I've found them to be unwieldy, sometimes stupid. And this may be one of those cases because of what you just described, but the fact of the matter is you have different types of meetings and they're noticed in a particular way, and that is extremely, extremely important for open government purposes.
Can you clarify what's stupid? Sorry, I just wasn't sure what you were referring to.
The form over substance piece that as you guys were just describing, where you're going to have a public forum coming up. One could argue, well, what's the problem with doing it now? But that's a reality that the law doesn't permit that, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So we have a motion on the table that Eric made. Does anyone else have any other comments they want to make? Andrew?
Yes. Thank you. After a great deal of consideration, I've determined that I will be voting no on this motion. I do not take this decision lightly, and while I do think there is value in finding a way to reach a unanimous vote of a final candidate, I'm convinced in this case that I must vote no. My vote is based on the fact that I believe Dr. Sonia Stewart was the best choice based on the community feedback that I received and on my own research. Dr. Stewart's combination of transformational dynamic leadership and proven experience in Nashville provided us with a unique opportunity to bring someone with new perspectives and bold ideas into the superintendent role. Our two finalists represent a choice between choosing a traditional candidate with superintendent experience versus a less traditional candidate with experience in a very large district without the title of superintendent. Green Bay has had outstanding superintendents over the years, some of whom were previous superintendents, and some were not. More actually were not than were. From the beginning, I've been committed to working professionally with the new superintendent, whoever might be chosen. I will actively welcome Stephen Murley into the district and do everything I can to help him be successful in his role. My vote tonight, however, must reflect the community input and independent research that led me to the conclusion that Dr. Sonia Stewart was the best choice for the Green Bay Area Public Schools.
Christina?
Thank you. I have determined that I will be voting no on this motion as well. After countless months of preparation, consideration, research, feedback, and community engagement, I am not able to vote in favor for a candidate for whom I have such significant concerns. I fully understand the magnitude of my decision, as it is the most important decision that I will make as a single board member for the Green Bay School District. The job of the Green Bay Area Public School District Superintendent is no small task. He or she must implement the school board's vision by making decisions about our 21,000 students, 3,000 plus staff members in 42 schools, including educational programs, spending, staff, and facilities. Though I will do everything going forward to make his superintendency successful, I want to explain very clearly why I will vote no for the hiring of Mr. Murley. First and foremost, I'd like to talk a little bit about this process. For the past year, my fellow board members have, to a person, articulated their commitment to working toward a more collaborative, less contentious process of decision making. And I have been nothing but 100% committed to that process. From the very beginning of this search, we all agreed that because of the significance of this hire, that we would strive for common ground, clear vision, and the need to coalesce around a candidate to ensure our district's success, both on the board and in the community. At every step of the decision-making process, except for this one, we have acted as a high-functioning group. We created shared goals, clear roles, and elements of mutual trust. In fact, our decision to select our two semifinalists were done based on intense yet effective teamwork. Unfortunately, several of my colleagues today seem to have lost their way. And hiring our new superintendent with a split vote is the very opposite of a high-functioning team. I am disappointed by some of our decisions to move forward on these lines. We knew it would be nearly impossible to get a complete community consensus around either of these candidates, but from my time Mr. Murley was announced as a finalist, a series of concerns came forward expressed by some community leaders, and it also came forward from the complete interview process. I have serious reservations about hiring him as a superintendent, and many in our community seem to agree. And I also want to highlight another thing tonight as well, and to remind my fellow school board members and the public that it doesn't have to be this way. According to our agreement with HYA, our search firm, it was in our contract that they would recruit new candidates to the board at no additional cost, barring travel, advertising, and due diligence, if the first contingency was met, which was if no superintendent is selected by the board from the candidate presented by HYA. I was not given this opportunity to go back to look at other candidates, and for that I am deeply disappointed. We had the clear option of going back and looking for another candidate that would have been a great fit, And I know everyone was anxious to hire a superintendent, but this is the most important decision that this board will ever make in the span of several years. We need to make sure it's the right decision, and there's no reason to rush it. Regardless of my vote, just like Andrew said, I want to ensure our community that I will be moving forward, and I will pledge to work with Mr. Murley because I believe in this district, and with every fiber of my being, I want us all to succeed. But I am deeply disappointed with the decision to move forward by my fellow board members. It didn't have to end this way.
Rhonda?
I also have a statement. Selecting a superintendent to lead one of the largest school districts in the state of Wisconsin has been a huge undertaking and honor. This process began with the board choosing a search firm to not only guide us through the process, but to bring us candidates worthy of our ever-changing and amazing community. And in full disclosure, I did not vote to approve the hiring of that search firm. But after the decision was made, I was willing to do the best work in the most intentional way. After interviews, community forums, and hours of discussion with teachers, families, and other community members, it was time to determine who we would put forward for an official vote. Closed session discussions around employment are not discussions that I am able to share verbatim because of employment laws and state statute language. But I can assure you that I made myself very clear in those meetings around the serious concerns that I had, and I still have today, of the consideration of Stephen Murley as the next superintendent of the Green Bay Area Public School District. It's important to note that my no vote on this candidate does not stand alone. Over the course of the last few weeks, I have heard from many people who've made it known that their candidate of choice was Sonia Stewart, not Stephen Murley. There were also several people who asked me to continue the search. It is my personal opinion that any superintendent coming into a school district after nearly a decade-long tenure of the previous superintendent needs as much support from the school board as possible to succeed. And I would like someone to debate that point with me. I would be very open to that discussion. My belief is that a 4-3 vote does not answer that call at all. There's no mandate. Recognizing the lack of support behind Stephen Murley, and per the search firm's contract language as Christina presented, I made it known to my fellow board members that I was willing to reconsider new candidates. Unfortunately, there were not enough board members to move forward in that direction. Why? Well, you're going to have to ask them. I believe that a box was checked today, but we didn't do this right. I was hoping that all members of this board had the political will and courage to accept nothing less than full support for one of the most significant and pivotal community leadership positions that we have in this area. Moving forward, as long as I am serving on this school board, I will continue to show up to give voice to the voiceless. If anything, this decision solidifies even more so my resolve to fight for what is right every day. My vote is no.
Eric?
So for the last 8 months, I have led the board through this search process for our next superintendent, something that I've been felt very honored to do. And along the way, it has been my goal to be collaborative, inclusive, and transparent. And as we began to explore the applicants, I've always tried to keep us grounded in the desired characteristics of our next leader that were identified by our community. Skills like experience with board relations and governance, evidence of past success, legislative advocacy, and operational skills required of an incredibly large district, the 4th largest in the state of Wisconsin. In my opinion, Stephen Murley met every single characteristic in that profile. It's important to point out that I was also contacted by several people in our community who felt the same way. And I will acknowledge that I did receive feedback on both sides, and it was a very difficult decision. And I think it would behoove me to say that I did hear from people who felt like the other candidate was the best. I had to weigh all of that feedback. Regarding the feedback, I appreciate everyone who was involved. Listening sessions, surveys, emails, meet and greets. I had dozens of contacts, and that's encouraging to me. I want to thank all of those people who have participated in this process, and I realize that there are members of our community today who are disappointed that the person that they felt was best isn't the person that we're bringing forward today. But that doesn't mean that we didn't listen to you. At the end of the day, I'm disappointed that we couldn't come to a consensus on a single candidate. But I believe this is how democracy works. We are elected by our community, trusted to perform our fiduciary responsibility and make the decisions that we feel are in the best interest of the students and staff of this school district. A majority of the board feels that Stephen Murley has the experience, leadership, and vision to put our district in the best position to succeed moving forward. I hope that everyone in our community can welcome him to Green Bay and support him in his duties as our next superintendent, because a failure to do so would be a tremendous disservice to the students and staff of the Green Bay Area Public School District. I will be voting yes.
And I'd like to piggyback a little bit on what Eric just said, and I agree with all of what he said. I'd just like to provide a little more detail to my thinking as to why I will be voting yes. As all of us did, we spent a tremendous amount of time in this process. Spent a lot of time with interviewing, a lot of time after the interviews, talking to references. I read and reread every single written form of communication I received on the candidates. It was not there were opinions on every issue, and the opinions were different. The feedback helped me to dig deeper. I listened to the concerns that community members had, and I dug deeper into those issues so that I could confidently sit here tonight and say that I'm very confident that the issues that have been concerns of community members, I don't see as becoming issues today. I looked at, again, the leadership profile. Stephen Murley has extensive experience in 2 different districts, working with multiple different boards. He's very committed to equity. You can see that in the work that he's done in his district. He uses a very specific budgeting process for making sure that resources are allocated very equitably. He went through a massive reboundary process in his district, and that was driven by equity. It was equity of resources, equity of the demographics of the school, and equity of the school buildings. Because he said that if we have nice buildings in our district, every single student should be able to go to a school that's a nice school. So he had a $191 million referendum, had 4,000 of his 7,500 elementary students attended new schools this year. To me, that's innovative. It's a way of looking at equity in a different way. He's also worked with, he's done a lot with working to reduce the disproportionality with suspensions at secondary, and also to decrease and remove the seclusion boxes, which I know everyone is very concerned about, and reduce the use of seclusion in his district. He's done a lot with providing trauma-informed care, implicit bias training, and extensive use of PBIS throughout the district in response to his concern in those areas. He has, according to his references and what I see and what he's done, he has an incredible ability to take in a tremendous amount of information and help everyone process it to come up with systematic and strategic solutions to opportunities and challenges in the district. He's currently working on something called the Portrait of a Graduate. He has about 150 community members and staff and parents and students getting together to say, what do we want our high school graduates to have when they leave us? And using all of that information, they will then go back and create a strategic plan that will grow that graduate that the community has defined. I'll say one quick thing about the seclusion boxes, a couple quick things. He inherited the problem. He worked slowly, but he had to work slowly and diligently to get the seclusion boxes out of his district. He had to provide professional development to a staff that have been using this as one of their strategies for a very long time. It's part of their state law. It's written into law, including the dimensions of the boxes that the districts can use. They currently are redebating the law that they have, and they're not prohibiting the seclusion boxes, but they're redefining the appropriate use of them in the law, and they're having conversation about this as I speak. And they're also redefining the dimensions of the boxes because they feel they must be bigger. So this is not an Iowa City Steve Murley. It's a state of Iowa. And I assure you that he is a very progressive thinker. This was not something that he tried to keep in his district by any means. It just is a complicated process, as we all know, when we dramatically change how we approach certain things in our district. It takes a long time to bring everyone along and give them the skills that they need to be able to be successful with students. So I'm confident in my vote. I think he's proven himself as a great leader. His references speak very highly of him. People like working with him. His teachers union is 100% supportive of him. So I will be voting yes.
This is my fourth and final superintendent search in my duration, and I have to agree with what Eric has said and what Brenda has said. I think I liken the seclusion boxes that Steve inherited in Iowa City to Act 10 that Michelle inherited when you first came to Green Bay. And you were very skilled when you came through and saw our district move forward from Act 10. I have to say I've never been referred to as a lost sheep in the process. And on the other hand, I was very impressed with Sonia Stewart as well. And I've had to do a lot of comparisons, and I have decided to vote with my head and not with my heart, and I am supporting Steve Murley.
Laura?
Thank you, Brenda. Every time I sit at this table, I try to remind myself what I am responsible for and what is at stake. I was elected to make hard decisions, and this has been the hardest in my almost 3 years on this board. And no, I haven't lost my way. Our board is made up of 7 very different people, and we are all just human beings trying to do the right thing. Our process for this decision was long, deliberative, and solid. It yielded 2 very strong but very different candidates. Everyone on this board and in this community had a chance to be part of the process and offer their input. I heard from many, many people via email, telephone, social media, and in-person contact. The feedback was much divided. My decision about this hiring is based on that feedback, my contact with the 2 candidates, and the deliberations I shared with my fellow board members. We've been on quite a journey together. Some of our discussions took place in closed session and can't be shared here, but were part of my decision-making process. In the end, I had to ask myself these questions. What is best for children? What is best for our district staff? What is best for citizens and taxpayers? And finally, which candidate best understands the reality of being responsible for 21,000 students, 3,000 staff members, and a $400 million budget? So I will be voting for Stephen Murley as our new superintendent. I'm taking this vote in good faith. Our school district is the lifeblood of our community and a huge driver in our economy. In making this decision, I want to stress our common future, and I'm ready to start the process of transition. I want to assure you that if the vote had gone the other way, I'd be doing the same thing, calling for unity. From everything I've heard, Dr. Langenfeld has a pretty ambitious agenda for these last 4 months. And I want to invite you all to partner with us as we unite around these two leaders and make a smooth transition. Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready to vote. Sandy?
Becker?
No?
Vanden Heuvel?
Yes.
Maloney? Aye. Sitnikow?
No.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
No.
Right. Carries 4-3. And again, I would echo Laura's well-said message, just that I hope that despite our split vote on this, that we can come together as a community and welcome our new superintendent and do everything we can to make sure that he's successful, because at the end of the day, it's important for our kids.
I think everybody said that. So,
I was more referring to the community.
okay. Well, just making sure.
That's fine.
There could be places where not everyone on the no side says that. There are much, 4-3 is tough, but there are much worse 4-3s in other places that don't end with each of the people voting no saying that I'm committed to working with the new superintendent, even though the vote didn't go my way, and that's important to recognize, I think. So.
Yes, agreed. All right. I'd entertain a motion under the district wellness policy.
I do also want to note that one of Mr. Murley's strengths was working with challenging boards, so he will be welcome here. All right. I would move that the procedures for implementing district wellness policy 458-rule as presented be approved.
Second.
Okay. So I have a few things. Yep. So one, I just want to thank the Wellness Committee and the team. Some of you are here. Thank you for this. This was a significant body of work, good conversation, and I think the policy or the rule that comes forward tonight reflects that. One of the things that the committee really spent a lot of time digging into was the language around recess not being able to be taken away as consequence. And I think the language that is in here, which was the original language that came forward from the Wellness Committee, is a good step forward. I just want to also give some context to the board and to our community tonight that one of the pieces that we felt like strengthened the rule was the language around professional learning, with building administrators, teachers, and recess facilitators and supervisors around the MLSS system, and about really building out, ensuring that we are supporting all of our teachers and staff around best practices for physical activity. And that came forward from conversation and the need that was sort of shared by teachers and staff. So just wanted to give some context to that, so thank you everybody for your help. Should I read this now? Sure. So there was one other piece that was accidentally left off from the policy or the rule when it came forward. So this was not intentional, so we're all in agreement. This just needs to be added in. And I am just going to make that motion to amend. So I move to amend the motion, correct, by adding in the language, and I'll just read this.
Right.
Okay. So I move to amend the motion by adding language under 3B2F. And the language will be elementary, and I have a copy up here, so we can share that with you guys later. Elementary schools shall provide at least 20 minutes of recess for all students. Middle school and high schools are encouraged to provide a minimum of 20 minutes of physical activity, including recess for all students. In the event of an altered school day, school administration may adjust recess minutes and scheduling to accommodate instruction and other needs.
And Vicky is nodding.
Is there
Always
a
good
second?
sign. Second. Always a good sign.
Just an oversight.
Okay.
I have a question about this, and I'm just wondering, just so I understand how it would shift secondary, what they do currently with recess and what we're asking them to do. How many secondary schools provide recess? Does FIED count? Does open?
Yep. Let me
Okay.
answer. Okay, so FIED doesn't count because FIED's not recess. What the secondary language says are encouraged to provide 20 minutes of physical activity. And if you look at the definition of recess in the rule, it talks about how recess, the definition includes other opportunities for physical activity beyond a traditional recess space. So it's just essentially saying that we are encouraging secondary schools for kids to be physically active throughout the school day, including recess. That's the intention of that language. Does that clarify, Brenda?
Well, I'm wondering I get the language and I get what we're trying to do. I'm just wondering how it affects our secondary schools in terms of, are they able to provide recess? Is that something that they've talked about? I know we have open campus at our high schools, and I see lots of kids outside playing and ball in the front of the schools and being somewhat active. But I'm just wondering if all of our secondary schools provide recess, what does that look like, and where does that time come from, and how does that shift happen?
I appreciate the language that Ms. Shelton shared by encouraging. The committee, including our representative who's a high school principal, really wants to explore those opportunities. So this opens the door for us to discuss it further.
Okay, so you haven't had any specific discussions
No,
yet?
ma'am.
It just opens the door. Okay, that's great, thanks. Andrew? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For me, this I interpret this as a minimum of 20 minutes of physical activity, like, which could include a period of time called recess, but probably realistically would be having open campus lunch, but I think I didn't see the need to dig deeper with the wordsmithing here. I think it means which could include recess, but I think it's probably part of the open. It probably fits into open lunch. I'm this was a touchy subject, and I'm committed to, over the next year, looking at this, and I'm told that the board intent does count. I think it's, and please stop me if I'm wrong, but I think as we've commented about this, no board member is okay with a standard frontline behavior consequence being taking away of an entire recess. I don't think anyone is okay with that. Not from what I've heard over these many discussions. That also does not mean, and I never meant, as we talked about this, that the kid who is out there hurting other kids on the playground, just too bad they get to have recess when they want. Nope. It's some kind of a break, some kind of a opportunity for movement, and I can see a lot of ways where certain behaviors would exclude someone from getting the type of recess that they want when they want with the same kids that they're causing problems for. Absolutely. I just don't want to see the opportunity taken away to decompress a little bit. So we also talk about staff development in here now, and making sure that the people, some of our monitors who might make the initial call as to whether a kid can continue participating or not in recess will now all have training and know where the board is is at with this and know what to do. So I think this is a step in the right direction that I can get behind.
Actually, we have a motion to amend, so is your question related to the amendment or to the policy?
It's related to, in general, the conversation.
Okay, but I
Then
just
we should
want
do the
to,
amendment
I want to
first.
do the amendment and then we'll have the whole policy put together if it passes. Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney? Aye. Sitnikow?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
All right, carried 7-0, so, Rhonda.
Christina, could you just touch on what this conversation, why this came to be? Just give us kind of an idea of why this has been discussed, why there was a committee put into play for this, all of the time and energy and everything spent around it. Why it's important for kids.
Thanks, Rhonda. So the committee is required when you participate in this federal school breakfast and lunch program. So this committee oversees the work of the policy and rule, but also implementation. So at the district level, but also at the building level as well. So it's really exciting because it's really about operationalizing the policy, but also feeding back information up into policy of what culture and climate is happening at the school. So I think it's a great way for many different stakeholders to come together and to really prioritize the well-being of our students and staff and school community, because we know that when students and staff and communities are healthy, they're going to be more successful in learning and also in participating in their community at large. I would say the conversations have been challenging, but in a really positive way, because the end we all want and believe physical activity is important. It's how do you get there in a way that ensures that teachers have the flexibility, but kids have the ability as well to move their body. So I think that I feel really good about where this project came forward, because I think it shows a commitment to doing some pretty hard work at the committee level, but also sort of thinking broadly and sort of a long-term strategy of where we need to come. And so, and I think an example of is the language around recess restriction. What we heard from teachers and staff was, the stronger, air quotes, language that wasn't really, we weren't ready for that, or didn't fit our district entirely, right? But what the common theme was that we needed more support for our recess facilitators and our teachers and our students just generally. And so I think that professional learning plan really gets to the sort of the root of the concern. Yeah, so I felt really positive. I hope that answers your question.
Vicki, did you want to add anything to that? Okay.
All right, oh, Michelle, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Vicki for her leadership and Christina for coming together on this and working so hard with incredible people on this effort. I think we, at the end of the day, all agree that we want kids to. I think we'd all agree that we want children to be able to move, and I know it's been a hard road. And I just appreciate the perseverance to come to this opportunity so that every child is afforded the best opportunity they can, and at the same time it acknowledges the nuances of each individual child and what has to be supported for that child. So thank you for that.
So we have the original motion needs to be changed. So I'm wondering, as amended.
Okay. All right, I'm going to read this one more time. Hold you to it this time. I move that the procedures for implementing district wellness policy 458-rule as amended be approved.
Second.
That motion's already on the floor,
Not as amended.
but we just amended it. You don't make a new motion when you amend the main motion.
Okay,
We have the motion, we amended it, and so now it's just to vote on,
the amended motion.
yeah.
All right, Sandy?
Shelton?
Aye.
Maloney? Pause. Aye. Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
McCoy? Aye. Becker?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. And I too want to echo the work of those of you who have worked hard on this committee. I think we've come to a really good place, so thank you for your work on this. I'd entertain a motion for adjournment of our special board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll go right into our regular board meeting. Oh, yeah. That's right, I forgot, sorry. We'll take a break. Start our teaching and learning work session. And before we begin, I'd like to remind members of the public that you can view the board agenda and handouts as well as minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at www.gbaps.org. Click on Our District at the top and then on the left, Board of Education. On that left menu, you will find a link to Agendas and Minutes. This link will take you to a website called Agenda Manager where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from board meetings are housed. Also, the board will provide our community with two different opportunities during tonight's meeting to speak before the board. The first opportunity is during our open forum. The second opportunity is during agenda items where indicated by public comment on our agenda. All speakers must fill out a form indicating their desire to speak. If you wish to speak during tonight's open forum, you may do so with respect to items that are posted on tonight's agenda or any other matter you wish to share with the board. Please know that Wisconsin's open meeting law prohibits the board from conducting business on matters brought during this open forum. The board also will permit public comment during agenda items as noted on the board's agenda. During this public participation time, consistent with state and federal laws, board members may engage in dialogue with the speakers. In order that all voices are heard, the board will suspend engagement until all speakers have had a chance to speak. The process for speaking during our agenda items is as follows. The board will first hear the presentation and discuss the agenda item before calling on those who desire to speak. If you want to speak during a specific agenda item, please fill out a form and give it to the board secretary at any point during the meeting. If you desire to speak and haven't yet filled out a form, just indicate that to the board secretary and you can fill out a form afterwards. The board secretary will provide the names of those wishing to speak to the board member conducting that part of the meeting, and you will be called upon to speak at the appropriate time. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. If your comments are longer than 5 minutes, please submit them in written form. Excuse me. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address. We have two people that have filled out forms that would like to speak during our open forum, and I'll call them up in the order that I received. First is Denise Gaumer-Hutchison.
Push the one in the middle that has the profile.
With the voice, yeah, there you go.
Good evening, I'm Denise Gaumer-Hutchison. I live at 3184 Hermans Road in New Franken, Wisconsin, which would be the Weequahic, Red Smith, and Preble neighborhood. I'm here tonight to thank the school board and the Green Bay Area School District staff for their hard work to select a superintendent for the Green Bay Area Public School District. As a former parent of the school district and a community member in the district, this decision has been really critical for the future of our children and of our community. I've had the honor of working with 4 superintendents in this district and helping to raise our children in this district, from Weequahic to Red Smith and on to Preble. I was asked to work on the last 3 referendums for this school district, the last referendum being very large and very important, and we've seen some amazing additions to school districts and even having the opportunity to build a brand new school. I've also had the opportunity to serve on some of the school district's task forces to investigate boundaries and to address overcrowding at some of our school buildings. And we have firsthand experience with that with our children at Preble. I've also had the opportunity to serve on the Superintendent's Parent Advisory Board for 12 years. So it was really interesting to learn about both candidates for superintendent. I was very impressed with both candidates and what they had to offer to the district. They were both interesting, challenged, and had great experiences. I didn't have a chance to be here to see Steve Murley. I was out of town, but I did have the opportunity to be here to meet Dr. Stewart, and was extremely impressed with her and what she had to offer the district. But I was concerned when I submitted a couple of questions for her to answer in the open forum, and I was concerned with her lack of awareness and information and knowledge about referendums, understanding that may be in the future, very near future, for this school district. I was also concerned when she talked about being in a large school district in a metropolitan area, and that school district was 900 students. And we have one school building in this district with almost 3 times that number of children. Not quite 2.5. But, and so that was concerning to me as well. I took the time because I wasn't going to be able to be here for Dr. Murley's interview and his communication with the community in that forum, to investigate him as well and to call friends and associates and people that I knew in Iowa who could address what might be of interest to me to learn about. And I was extremely impressed with what, Brenda, you said earlier about his experience with referendums and passing referendums, that he's a very teacher and student-focused superintendent, and that's really important for the success of our children in this ever-changing school district, and that he had a really wonderful relationship with the union and with his teachers. And that's also extremely important to me after what in the past we have been through in the school district. So all of those things combined, I was very pleased tonight when I came to hear that the choice that you had made. That's not to say that I think that Dr. Stewart would not be an extremely valuable asset to this district. But I just think that right now, with what's coming in the future and anticipating participation in helping and supporting with a referendum, that we have someone on board who would be able to assist with that effort and be involved with that effort. And so thank you for your very, very hard work. And I think both candidates would be extremely valuable in this school district, but I just feel like he had a little more to offer. And the research that I did from people in Iowa who have worked with him in the last 10 years, he was considered a very, very strong candidate and had a lot of really wonderful experience with a very diverse board, with a very diverse community. Iowa City was compared a lot to Madison and what it's like in Madison and things like that. And so he had a lot of value. And I just want to again thank all of you for your extremely hard work, knowing that each and every one of you are extremely committed to the success of children in our community. So thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Next is Jennifer. Thank you, Denise. Next is Jennifer Garner.
Thank you. I really appreciate being able to address you tonight, and I have to tell you that I followed this process very closely, and I found it far more interesting than the presidential primaries. First, I'd like to extend my thanks to you and my wholehearted support for your selection of Steve Mulry. Your process was rigorous and thorough and mirrored the searches I participated in when I worked at the University of Wisconsin. You investigated your candidates on multiple occasions. You extended an invitation to members of the community to meet them and ask questions. You engaged numerous stakeholder groups, and your selection reflects the majority opinion of the stakeholder groups you met with. I would also like to thank you for doing more than a Google search on our candidates and really delving into their backgrounds and learning the context behind some of the decisions that they've made. Our district, like so many others, faced significant challenges with funding, demographics, physical plant issues. We need someone who has proven experience in making tough decisions and managing those challenges. This decision does not detract from the extraordinary talents of Dr. Sonia Stewart. Her content knowledge on issues of equity, curriculum, and other issues related directly to the classroom was impressive. With the appropriate administrative experience, she will certainly make a fine superintendent. But at this moment in time, with a district this large, We need someone with proven experience, and I believe that that person is Stephen Murley. Thank you for your diligence in this effort.
Thank you, Jennifer. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before the board at this time? Seeing none, we will move on to our teaching and learning work session, and that'll be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
Thank you, Brenda. We have 2 discussion items. The first is Head Start 2020-21 continuation application summary.
Thank you for having us, and I have with me tonight Executive Director Ann Barsh and our programming supervisor and coordinator of everything wonderful about Head Start, Sally Jensen.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
All right. We have 2 items in front of the board tonight, and that is the first one that is up is the Head Start continuation application summary, and then the self-assessment. The application summary is the funding of our Head Start program, and if you have questions about that process, we will answer those.
Do board members have any questions? Yeah.
That's because we come every year at the same time. This is what we do. Soon for another one.
This year was quite a large increase, almost $1 million from last year, and that was due to the second supplement grant that we received for remodeling the new building and hiring the additional staff to increase 102 full-day spots starting next fall.
And I'd like to say, of course, there's so much that we could say about our Head Start programming, how well it serves students who need early support in their education, and the great resource that it is, as well as Sally and Ann's efforts to be creative in the way that we serve with our programming. We were just talking about some different efforts with mental health grants and other supports that really will allow us to have robust, comprehensive service for our Head Start students, and we're very grateful.
Do you want to, sorry, did you want to talk about the new grant? Not the smaller new grant?
I said I'd never write another one, but there is actually an opportunity coming through the Office of Head Start. We should receive the letter soon. It will be due in May, and that is the opportunity for Head Start programs across the United States to write for increase in staff to support mental health and trauma-informed care. So we're just really excited about that, and we will certainly probably be back here in April asking for your approval on that grant.
One of the beauties of that grant is we have to apply for it, but it's non-competitive. And so there's a certain dollar amount per student that they will be awarding. So we're thinking around $84,000 according to what we've heard. Yes. So that will be wonderful for our program. Right. We're going to talk about the self-assessment.
Sure. All right, next. That goes out quickly. The self-assessment is something that we conduct every year, and I've been here every year at this time presenting to you. It is regulation that the Head Start program conduct this self-assessment to measure our program's effectiveness, goals and objectives, and to use that data to identify areas of strength and areas to improve. We compile all of that information each year. We run the self-assessment over a 2-month period, analyze the data, compile it, the information, and then we put it into a self-assessment improvement plan. So we have this report divided into a couple different areas. First, we mention the program performance standard that requires us to conduct the self-assessment. Then in our Appendix B is the self-assessment summary, the data that we gathered and analyzed. We reached out not only to our Head Start staff, our program administration, our community partners, and our parents in the program to put together this summary. And then Appendix C is the improvement plan that we've put together that starts actually in March of 2020 through June of 2021. So are there any questions about our summary and improvement plan?
Brenda?
I just have one question. There's, you referenced double session classrooms. What does that mean?
Those are the morning and afternoon.
The
The double session are the classrooms where we enroll a morning session and then they go home and then we have an afternoon session. So even though we're going to be having 170 full day programming classes next year, or 170 spots of full day, we are still continuing our morning afternoon double sessions.
And so you have here increased staff support of the double session classrooms at the beginning of the school year. What's the purpose of doing that?
When I had the opportunity starting in 2016 to write the supplement grants to increase to full day services, I had the opportunity to write for additional staff, but I was only able, and so therefore we've hired monitors for each of the full day classrooms. So a third set of hands for 4 hours of the day. I was only able to do that for the full day services, and now we've really seen the difference and the lack of support that our morning afternoon double session kids are not getting, and they are our youngest, our 3-year-olds. So we decided to put it into an improvement plan to see how we can get creative to access other staff that we might have in the building to support, especially in the beginning of the year when they're first walking through those doors in its first school experience.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Michelle?
I just want to continue to express our gratitude to you, Sally. You just are an amazing grant writer, but most importantly, you adore the kids, and you are just doing really wonderful work on behalf of children and families, and as well for your support of Sally and the whole team at Head Start. So please extend our gratitude to everyone.
Thank you very much. Always good to see you, Sally.
Thank you for your support.
And that concludes the teaching and learning work session.
All right, next is organizational support work session, and that'll be facilitated by Christina Shelton.
Thanks, Brenda. We don't have anything on business and finance discussion items, so we'll move to human resource discussion items and public comment. First up, we have the benefits renewal update.
This time, I believe Melissa Thiel-Collar will be joining us, and it looks like Beck Krasinski from M3. And Cindy Van Asten.
Oh, there's Cindy.
No. And more from M3, and they can do introductions. So. Thank you.
Yes.
Is Jennifer coming? Oh, she's hiding in the background. She's here.
Thank you again for having us tonight. We are bringing to you one more update with respect to where we are in the 1920 plan year, and that is going to segue into our recommendations for the rates for all of our benefits for the 2021 year. And again, thankful to have Cindy and Beck from M3 here with us today. They also brought along 2 other individuals that I'll allow Cindy to introduce when we get to that point in the presentation. So I'm just going to turn it over to Cindy and Beck. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to start out talking about the key strategies and initiatives that we've been working on and updating you along the way. We'll touch on the meetings with the Benefit Advisory Committee, the discussions we've been having on telehealth and virtual medicine, and then an update on the dependent eligibility verification. We had our third Benefit Advisory Committee meeting on February 18th. At that meeting, we had previously met in December and asked the committee members to go back and meet with constituents amongst their peer group and get feedback on telehealth and virtual health. We gathered that information from them, and at the February 18th meeting, really learned that we would continue to do some research on telehealth and virtual visits and continue to monitor the near-site clinic utilization that was just implemented in 2019. That along the process in 2020, we'll come back and determine if it made sense to add telehealth or to continue educating and communicating to members on how to use the near-site opportunities that are available to them.
The third initiative that we've been working on during this plan year was our dependent eligibility verification process. That process occurred during the months of December and January, and we are pleased to share that we had a 99% completion rate with 1,991 employees and just shy of 5,000 dependents. A 99% completion rate is very positive. 233 dependents were removed from the plan during the amnesty period, which occurred during open enrollment in June for that July 1st plan start date. 62 dependents were potentially ineligible due to failure to complete the appropriate processes, either a rule violation, failure to submit the affidavit that was requested, or due to incomplete or inaccurate documents justifying the benefits or the dependent's eligibility for those benefits offered by the district. So with those folks who came off the plan, the estimated savings is just over $1.6 million, and that's utilizing the annual estimated cost from the most recent plan year to insure a dependent.
Yes.
If I could just offer a comment, I know that Melissa put together, excuse me, a document that defined the work that was done to ensure that the notifications and whatnot for everyone. And it's so comprehensive, and we are looking at it as a model as to take that out best practice. She and Jennifer Vincent and the team from M3. To do it in a mindful way to ensure that everyone had multiple communications and opportunities to complete this. And obviously with 99% and the outcome, it was a huge undertaking, but certainly the opportunities now that will be afforded not only our employees, but also the benefits to our kids. It's just amazing. So thank you.
Just a question. The 62 dependents that are potentially ineligible, was that before the last 2 weeks of February, those additional outreach, or is that after?
Those are those that were initially identified as ineligible after the completion of the process with Impact Interactive. Then Melissa, Jennifer, and Mary had contact with each of those individuals to ensure that if the dependents needed to be removed from the plan, that they were accurately being done. And if they needed to provide more information, then they accessed those additional pieces of information.
Just curious, did the number change at all, Melissa?
Christina, can you move
the microphone? Sorry. Did the number, I was just curious if you were.
Sorry. It will change. There were some people who just didn't complete it, even though they were told that was the deadline, and they just didn't complete it and thanked us for the additional opportunity to finish. And then there were a number of people who stated that, yep, that person did not belong on the plan and I just didn't take them off, so I understand you're going to be taking them off. And then there were a few complicated situations that's why we had the additional reach out before we took anyone off the plan, and so we're working through those. And as you may remember, board member Becker passed a motion when the verification was approved that anyone could appeal to the board, but I think we're pretty satisfied there would be no need for appeals, because those who understood that their dependents were going to be taken off understood they were legitimately taken off the plan.
The next document in the handout I'd like to walk through is the health and benefit plan performance summary. As a reminder, this document, the top is looking at all of the planned options that are provided, and then we break that down into the actives and retirees. And then we look at all of the $500 deductible plans combined, all of the $1,500. When we talk about combined, we're talking about active and retiree status. On the all combined through January of 2020, the plan has performed at a 92% funding ratio. So total plan costs were $25,813,000 and projected based on the rate equivalents we're using today, $27,932,299, with a funding difference of $2,118,953. The near-site clinics, while they are a no-cost option to the members, the district pays direct with Bellin and Prevea, and the cost of those clinics was $217,583. We take that into consideration in the funding ratio, leaving the funding ratio through January at that 92%. The funding ratio at the same time in the last plan year, July of 2018 through January 2019, the plan was performing at a 104% loss ratio. So when we look at the active population and their plan performance through the first 7 months of the plan year, the active population is performing at an 87% loss ratio compared to the same time last plan year at a 97% loss ratio, and the retiree plans are performing at 163% loss ratio versus the 192% last year. So we would suggest that the plan changes that we made are having an impact to the plan performance, and that the near-site clinic strategies and physical therapy strategies that were implemented are absolutely taking an increase in utilization and having an impact on the whole, although we really have not had enough time to recognize the full impact that those strategies are having on the plan to date. When we look at the retiree population and the funding loss ratio of 163%, we would suggest that the plan premium rates as they're set just are not equivalent to the utilization that's happening in those plans today. So our recommendation, which was provided to you in a handout in your packets, really is to continue with the actives at a flat rate as it is today with the same premium rates, and to increase the retiree populations that are not yet qualified for Medicare at a 5.4% increase, and to increase the members that are Medicare primary at 14.93% increase. This more appropriately starts to build some differentiation between the active and the retiree population, and we will continue to educate the Medicare population and what their options are outside of just being on the district's health plan. And we're taking extra steps this year to try to build in some webinars and try to make it easier for folks to attend. We do know from past years that people who have attended the Medicare sessions have, in many cases, elected to find more robust coverage at a better price ratio. And to give you an example in that, one of the plans that is offered to the retired population is a pharmacy only. So the Medicare retiree could choose a supplement plan, but use the district's plan for pharmacy. Well, the premium on your pharmacy only plan is just under $500 per month. There's only 10 members on that plan, but one of the 10 members has only used $600 in a given year for medication, where they're paying $500 a month for premium. So that's an opportunity to just help educate and offer them opportunities to evaluate what's the best suited plan for them. The dental plan, we're calling for a flat rate across the board, those rates would stay as is in place. Any questions, comments? Andrew?
That's all right. Andrew, go ahead.
Yes, is it is there any case where someone would be financially to their advantage to take the district prescription only plan if eligible for Medicare?
There could be. There could be, and we're just suggesting that members have the opportunity to understand even what the options are. But there could be an opportunity where the district's plan is better than what might happen in the donut hole of the pharmacy prescription plans.
But isn't the district's plan more expensive than the entire width of the donut hole, or has the donut hole gotten a lot wider?
I cannot answer that definitively, that the donut hole and where their medications bite. We work with an individual in our office that is dedicated and only works in that population, and she meets with the individuals to do a side-by-side comparison if they're interested. So it could be that you're correct. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we're good. And we'll move on to the district investigator job description. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, just extraordinary work on this as well. Yeah, well, they're ready. We got the actuary too, so. And I see Ellen back there. Terry is here to speak to this job description. I know that it was part of the discussion with the work group. I know that several board members have had opportunities to discuss it as well.
Sorry, they were having trouble hearing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know why.
Sorry, Michelle.
Anyway, thank you. So I just think there's a lot of clarification. Obviously, when the Board of Education requested that we have 2 meetings, we always have a reading and it affords discussion. So we're looking forward to this discussion to talk about why the need. And there are basically twofold areas that Terry will speak to and provide you with some important data as we've worked forward in this effort as well. So Terry, if you'd like to start, that'd be great.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to serve the Green Bay Area Public School District where we're... Absolutely.
Is the volume all the way up there?
I can definitely speak louder. I have a very loud voice. So I will use that voice. Elementary phy ed and teacher and principal voice. Definitely can fill the room if I need to. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, awesome. I've had a long service to the Green Bay Area Public School District, and one of the reasons I have chosen this district to be my school district of choice is the long-term commitment to providing fair and impartial support to a thriving workforce. Our focus on our employees on behalf of what's best for students is really something to be proud of. Over the past 2 or 3 years, we've had a lot of legislative and cultural changes that have really changed the landscape related to the investigation aspects that have led to the proposed job description that you have in front of you. The scope, the breadth, and the volume of these investigations certainly is reflective of the district, state, and national trends. Both the accuser and the subject of the problem or the incident or concern that's being brought forward deserve a fair and impartial and efficient investigation. Due to these factors affecting the scope and breadth and volume of the investigations, we're proposing this position to ensure that that continues to be the focus of our work and that we are being responsive in working to provide a fair, impartial, effective, and efficient process for our students, for our staff, as they have concerns that they are bringing forward. We've outlined some of the social and legislative changes throughout the school year and have been talking about a variety of data points as we look at changes that have impacted the investigations. Currently, the Director of Human Resources and myself have investigated 85 investigations of employee misconduct so far this school year, and we have been involved in 23 harassment, discrimination, and bullying events or concerns brought forward this school year. This work has significantly impacted the work in our department as a whole and is definitely impacting our ability to adequately address many of the other needs of our students and staff, such as substitute shortages, which are also reflective of state and national trends, new employment and verification relative to licensing requirements, and other areas that impact our schools. We've hired 394 new employees just since July this school year, and I think that is reflective of the new hires, as well as we've had a large number of transfers and employees that have the opportunity to move and put themselves in positions that fit them best. Most notably, over the past 2 years, allegations of harassment have really significantly increased. As set forth in the Board of Education's policy regarding discrimination and harassment, and as required by state and federal law, there are a number of procedural safeguards in place for both the accuser and the accused, often of whom are current employees. These procedural requirements include timelines, required components for investigation, and required written findings and appeal procedures. As a result, these investigations are time-intensive and very detail-oriented. In many circumstances, employees are placed on administrative leave while the allegations are investigated. This allows us to ensure safety and to put interim district measures in place. The investigation must be completed prior to making a decision on whether an employee may return to work or move forward with other employee determinations and outcomes. A fair and impartial investigation, as required by an employee's constitutional due process protections, requires that the investigation be thorough and complete, and also, again, fair and unbiased. In many circumstances, numerous persons, parents, community members, and students must be spoken to in order to complete that fair and impartial investigation and really hear multiple perspectives and gather the facts as best as we can to make sure we have an accurate and thorough picture. The bottom line is this takes a lot of time. This takes time to coordinate, schedule, meet, and really listen and hear what everyone has to say. All the while this plays out, the employee is not working, and this also puts a strain and drain on the school as well as the students, as well as the employees that are involved. The majority of these cases do result in the employee returning to their position of record. But while they are not working, we do work to cover classes and make sure that the school has what they need. And again, with substitute in high demand, that is one area that is significantly impacted. This year alone, so far to date, we've had 231 days of employees that have been off work due to investigations. This is compared to the last school year where there was a total of 343 days for the entire school year. So we're about halfway through the school year, to put that in perspective on the school data. As you are aware, the proposed job description also speaks to the investigations related to students. Students, as well as employees, are also afforded due process protections. Most notably, this position would be charged with investigations related to Title IX. The employee investigations relate to Title VII and all of the requirements outlined there. The student investigations relate to Title IX. A few remarks from me, but really Ellen Krieger is exceptional in the role and has firsthand knowledge of the student Title IX violations and all of the details related to those. Title IX is the federal law that protects students from discrimination based on sex in education programs, or activities. As noted in Board of Education policies, part of these protections afforded by Title IX include that districts are required to have a complaint and investigatory procedure for students to report allegations of harassment and discrimination because of sex. Just as with federal law regarding employees, Title IX protections are highly scripted and procedural. It is critical for the district to follow the complaint procedure and conduct fair and impartial investigations on behalf of our students. With the change of presidential administrations and the change in Department of Education secretary, the procedural requirements for Title IX are changing. Currently, the administrative regulations permit the individual who conducts the investigation to be the individual who recommends the interim measures or other actions to be taken as a result of the investigation. However, all individuals who conduct investigations must be trained to do so. For Green Bay Area Public School District, this means that principals are able currently to investigate the allegations and then work with Ellen, the district Title IX coordinator, to determine next steps in the investigation. Under the new administration, this would no longer be the case. Put simply, the person who conducts the investigation into the Title IX allegations cannot be the person who makes the recommendations from what is learned in the course of the investigation. It is still the case that the investigator must be trained to conduct investigations. In addition, Secretary DeVos recently issued a new civil rights initiative aimed at combating sexual assault in K-12 schools. Specifically, the initiative is aimed at protecting students from being assaulted by adults at school. This new initiative may result in added investigations that will need to be conducted in coordination with Human Resources as well as with the Title IX coordinator. I've been involved in several investigations that have crossed between staff and students, and it's been a real pleasure to work with Ellen. She's phenomenal. We're really lucky to have her. In the previous 2 years, the district reviewed 58 and 59 reports of potential Title IX incidents respectively. This year alone, we've already had 45 Title IX referrals made to district principals. The district investigator would work with the principals to investigate these allegations in, again, a fair and unbiased and expedient manner. Finally, while there are many other job duties noted in the job description proposed for you tonight, it's important to also acknowledge that the investigator would work with the district's background check reviews. This year, the district has already conducted 1,869 volunteer background checks and 632 employee background checks. This is a change in practice. Prior to when Jean Marsh came into the Human Resources Department, there was a very black and white approach to background checks, and if an individual had an offense, they were automatically eliminated from the process moving forward. We have, since Jean came into the Human Resources Department, we continue the practice that she began, where we have a review team that's looking at the background checks to ensure that we are supporting the opportunity for a more diverse group of individuals to be serving and supporting our students. And we do not want an individual that's had offenses in the past to be not permitted to volunteer or to be involved in their own child's school as a volunteer. So we have really worked to ensure student safety and again maintain that as our priority while carefully reviewing to ensure that we are also being inclusive and really working to support that collaborative relationship that we desire with our families within our school settings. The district continues to want individuals with diverse backgrounds to provide services to the district, and we need to be diligent in our review of our processes to ensure that we are, in fact, promoting those types of opportunities. We owe it to our students, our families, and our employees to conduct fair and impartial investigations, and we are committed, again, to a thriving workforce. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the data points as you consider some of the new legal requirements, cultural changes, and the data factors related to this request, and I look forward to the discussion as you weigh the decision on whether you support moving this proposed job description forward.
Myself, yeah, I forgot. It's been a long day. Terry, would it be possible for you to, because everything you said was just phenomenal, like to set the stage, could you share with us after the meeting, just in a condensed version, the data points specifically that you honed in on? Because I'd like to just be able to see those again.
I would be happy to, and I'm happy to provide additional data points as well if you are interested.
Eric.
So I want to appreciate all of those things that you brought forward, and I just want to share with the board and the public an experience that I had with Terry and a member of our staff who was recently diagnosed with cancer. And in all honesty, did not have a great experience with our human resources department after getting that diagnosis. And something that I've been working with Terry on very closely, and while some of it is related to the customer service experience that staff member experienced, Terry was, to her credit, was tremendous in working with that person and putting them at ease, including calling them on the weekends multiple times, checking up. So thank you for that work, Terry. I know that you've only been in your role a short time and have a lot of work to do. My point is that while some of that might be related to customer service, part of it was also related to workload and capacity. And this person, what they experienced was due in part also to not enough staff in that department. I know for a fact that in certain departments in our district, we don't have enough people. And when it comes to human resources specifically, part of that matters. That's why people enjoy staying in our district. And so I trust you to take a look at your department, identify where the work needs are, and bring forward a position that's not only going to do the work that you described, but also free up other people to do to provide those services to our employees. So thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you for the data points. And I look forward to not only this taking work off of other people's plates, but also a better experience for all of our employees.
Rhonda?
So I'm going to, I guess, touch on part of what Eric said about not enough staff and the workload that is there and creating some issues. When I look at the number of days off, employee conduct, investigations, harassment, bullying events, and the significant increase, I guess, to be honest, my thought went to right away just what you mentioned, but in the buildings. So have we thought or considered that maybe it's possible that lack of staff and workload is actually contributing to some of these numbers increasing? I don't know if that's the answer, but it does come to my mind, right? And when I think about that, I wonder if we actually can say that we know that. And if we don't, are we willing to look into it? Because I guess I'd have to wonder about why the increase. What do we believe the increase is, and what are we looking to try to resolve that with? Is the answer to resolve the amount of investigations, or just to manage them? And I think what's important because again, have heard from staff that have seen this on the agenda, and these are questions coming from myself and from staff as well. So it is curious to know what that looks like and how it was determined, because I'm hearing that, and I'm thinking as well, that if it's a cultural climate issue in general, then have we considered looking at it from the ground?
So if I can respond, I know Terry has something to say. I do think it's cultural, Rhonda. I think it's the culture that our administration has built in making staff comfortable to come forward. And I know I've heard from the board that people are afraid to come forward and make complaints and come forward and bring up issues that they have with coworkers because of fear of retaliation or fear of retribution. And I think we are under Dr. Langenfeld's leadership, under Jean's leadership, and now under Terry's leadership, under our building leadership, creating an atmosphere where people are comfortable coming forward and bringing forth complaints of things that they see in the classroom. And similarly, our students. A lot of these issues that we investigate are related to things that students have brought forward. And right, wrong, or indifferent, and whether they pan out to be verified in our investigation, it's important for us that students are heard and that students come forward and make those concerns heard. And with respect to the harassment and discrimination complaints that are increasing, this is common among school districts. It's common on my listserv almost every single day. The Me Too movement has had a significant positive impact with staff members, female and male, feeling comfortable and willing to come forward to voice concerns regarding what they believe to be harassment and discrimination. And that has really had an impact in our school district. So I just want to thank everybody for creating that positive culture. And while the workload has increased, I don't view it as a negative. I view it as a positive that employees feel comfortable in order to make those concerns heard. So thank you for giving us an opportunity to answer that. Terry, did you want to add anything?
I do. I think Melissa said it very well, and I would also like to add that you raise a really important point, and it's very important that this position also provide proactive support, and that we are reviewing the data and we are learning from the information that we are gaining in all of the interviews and in talking. And we have put some interim measures in place. We provided a change to our professional development. We have included information in our centralized series of support for our new hires, for example, to ensure that there's responsive measures being taken from what we are learning. So while this position really will require a lot of investigative action and it would be at the building, this is where the services would be provided, is in supporting that process to support our staff and our students from our buildings. It would also be important that we're looking at the information and putting proactive measures and responsive measures in place from what we're learning as well.
Thanks, Terry. And as you were talking, I was thinking too of a few of the employees that you and I have talked with that have brought harassment complaints forward, and they've been saying that they need a quicker turnaround to resolve and to be more proactive. And so it was just nice to be able to talk with you about how that connects to this position. So, Rhonda, did you have something too?
Yeah, so can you just touch on again, you discussed something about some legislation that's changing the process for principals.
I can try to touch on that for you. There are new regulations pending for Title IX. They have been pending. We've been waiting since November for them to come out. They are currently in front of the Office of Management and Budget, just waiting for approval for publication. It's going to change the way investigations for Title IX incidents for students can occur. As Terry pointed out in her presentation, currently we have our building principals do the investigations for Title IX, and then they contact me and we talk through it. We talk through what interim measures we can put in place, and then what other consequences once the investigation is finalized as to what other measures we made in order to keep students safe. That is going to change. The person that is doing the investigation will not be able to make the decision as to what the interim measure might be, and the decision maker cannot be the Title IX coordinator. And there is question out there as whether the Title IX coordinator can be the investigator as well. And that's obviously they're looking at inherent conflicts of interest for that. So they are changing that, and they are changing the process for what an investigation will look like. It will be much more formal than it currently is now, and there will be a lot more specific requirements that an investigator will need to follow. And in talking a little bit to Rhonda's point before, I think it is important to mention that currently our principals are doing these investigations, and they are not taken lightly for students because it's going to impact a student's education. And we need to ensure student safety across the district and in buildings. And this is a very time-consuming process for building principals right now, which is taking away from the other work a building principal can be doing in their buildings. So as I do as much as I can to help them currently, but they also are the people on the ground in the buildings to be the best person to do the investigation. So I think it's important to note that even at the current structure right now, that for the Title IX aspect, it would be a definite help to building principals.
Ellen, is there a document that kind of goes into all the things you just said about the Title IX and the updates that you could share with us?
I am currently trying to put something together because the initiative, the new initiative that came out from Secretary DeVos came out on February 26th to combat sexual assault. So I have been trying to monitor what that's actually going to look like for a school district and what that's going to mean for us. And I know it's going to require some more data collection. I'm also part of a listserv and part of a national organization for Title IX, and have been trying to monitor that to see what their take across the nation is, what this will look like for us. So I'm trying to do that timely, but also trying to do it in a way that makes sense with a lot of knowledge before we just put that out.
Go Rhonda and then Eric. Yep.
So you had talked about how a principal is in the building and they're closest to the scenario and the students. Is there any concern, because sometimes I believe that might actually help with due process because they're familiar. Is there any concern that if that's not what the structure looks like, that there would be, that maybe it would actually impact due process? I'm just wondering what you think about that.
I'm not entirely sure I understand your question. Could you? Thank you.
It's been a long day. You had mentioned the principals right now are doing the student investigations. And then if we would move forward with a different structure, that there wouldn't be as much involvement, or they would they still be as involved? I just want to know the percentage of how much they're involved.
What the federal government is saying is that they see an inherent conflict between when the person who does the investigation is the person who then decides the consequences. So they want that separated so that the person who's deciding the consequences is not the person investigating. If we were to say that the principal should do the investigation and someone else decide the consequences, I would have the concern that you're raising, because the person who's doing the investigation, they're fact-finding. They're learning as to what happened with the incident. But the person who's deciding the consequences knows how those consequences will impact the student, will impact the school environment, will impact the alleged victim and witnesses, and knows all those players. So when we thought about what would make the most sense to adhere with these new legislative requirements, it made more sense to have an impartial person come in with a fresh set of eyes to do the fact-finding, turn the fact-finding over to the principals, who could then decide and review that and ensure fidelity and consistency with working with Ellen as to what those penalties and interim measures would be, because that truly is the critical component of Title IX, ensuring that students are able to access their education irrespective of the harassment and discrimination because of sex.
And you believe that one position would satisfy the numbers that you have given us?
We don't know. We have to start somewhere. And I think it would be disingenuous to come and ask for more. We can always come up with interim measures to help safeguard and shore up if it's not enough, and we'll evaluate. But that's where we're going to start with one.
And to that, because there's nothing in our information as far as salary. So we don't even know ballpark what we're looking at. We don't know what this will look like budget-wise.
So a job description doesn't include the salary. That's why it's not in there. When we did a comparison and sought out sample job descriptions in other large urban school districts who have these positions, and a lot of large urban school districts have these positions, I was given a number of, Dr. Langenfeld asked to see the comparison job descriptions, and when I gave her the stack, she was not anticipating that many other districts having this job. The salary range, some districts focus on using someone who has a Juris Doctorate to perform this. Others focus on people who have law enforcement or educational background. We're going more on the lower end of the law enforcement or educational background, as you could see from the job description. So we're thinking between, again, we don't know because we don't have the market, but we're thinking between 50 and 70 would be a salary for this position.
Eric?
So obviously there's no shortage of work, but I'm just curious, being a 12-month position, what do you see this person doing in the summer months?
We actually had active investigations in the summer months. There were a number of significant ones that came forward that resulted in a considerable amount of time, actually beginning in July when I began and through to the start of the school year. We're also doing a significant amount of hiring, and therefore we're doing a lot of background check running, and there's a process that, again, we follow to make sure that we are being careful with safety, but also that we are being inclusive and open to allowing individuals to proceed forward in our process. So we would have that person involved or on point in the initial aspects of that, and then bringing information to the team that makes the decision. You know, as Melissa said, fact finding and doing those pieces, and then bringing to the team to ultimately make the decision. I currently do not make those decisions alone. I rely on the team in human resources, and Melissa's often involved in those reviews as well. It's not a single person decision, it's a team decision, but the information finding can sometimes be quite considerable. So I would foresee that as examples, those would be a number of pieces that we would have them involved with.
Michelle?
Thank you, all of you, for this important conversation. I think one of the pieces also that when you look at the numbers increasing, I believe it has a lot to also do with the amount of professional development. That when you define what the law says and you bring attention to it and you really clarify for people what that looks like, you will expect to see that people will pay greater attention. And I know our leaders have been afforded the professional development around Title IX. We just spent a fair amount of time looking at our own data that Ellen submits through the Department of Justice and really examining more deeply what that looks like. And so I would assume this person would also, and I see it in the job description as part of that as well, that in the summer months we would want to delve deeper into that data as well. One of the things that we talked about is we could have brought this and not brought this forward with this level of detail just because it really requires a special skill set, and it's a unique position that we've not had in the past. a human resource specialist. I think, Terry, I don't know how many positions you're down now that you're working on, 2 down. So, I mean, I think this is a little bit higher in wage, but not a whole lot. But I look at that and say, the complexities that we've seen just in terms of you've got legal involved, you've got a whole complexity and host of things, sometimes multiple people, has really drawn a different kind of opportunity for us to address. And that's really why we're bringing this forward, to have this important discussion. Again, it goes right back to where Terry started, the importance of making sure that people are treated fairly and equitably during a pretty rigorous process, and the timeliness matters because it's people's lives and they're waiting for answers. And at the same time, also in the same process, when they're diving deep into an investigation that takes a lot of resource and people, it draws away from other people. So, and I think, Eric, you explained how you experienced that as well. So we want to do what's right and best for our community, our school community, and this is where we saw an answer to address our needs.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have setting future agendas, scheduling the redesigned 2020 meeting.
When last we talked about with the board to move forward, we took a list away of looking more deeply at what was feasible in some of the scenarios that the board members defined at our meeting last week. What I would like to offer is that we believe we can probably accomplish most of those things in the month of March. But here's the complexity that came out in our conversation. One of the asks was around surveying only a couple of school groups. I think I talked about John Dewey, students and staff and families, as well as NEW. And as we talked about that, we think maybe that would get us ahead of where we want to be. That looking at space and place, the leaders can do that, and then we bring that back, and then go out, and we would expect that you would want us to not only survey that school or this school, but all schools. So it takes it to a new level when you start surveying people. And we didn't feel that if we didn't do it equitably with other schools, it wouldn't be fair, but more importantly, we would be getting ahead of the board in terms of information and data collection. So I don't know if I explained that well or right, but so our goal would be to provide the board with feasibility conversations with our leaders to talk about the spaces and places that you discussed, to bring those back to you, to have all of the information around cost and space and what have you for the different scenarios that you put out there. And then you can tell us this yes, this no, whatever the governance would like us to do to take it to that next level. And at the same time also, we would like to have that conversation about the communication and bringing the community into the conversations to make sure that we meet the board's needs. And it may be a combination of meetings, surveys, what have you. So we would like to make sure we're clear on that as well. So again, by April, I'd like to set up a time with you to bring all that data back in our homework, and then move that forward so that you can provide for us your input and your direction, so we know where you want us to go next as the governance team.
What point of April are you thinking?
Well,
do you have any dates in mind?
At this point, we do not. I know that we had a conversation. I don't know if we have any to avoid. You didn't get a response. Okay, we were just checking with Casey to see if there were any dates to avoid. But let's get, if I could get a couple from you, that would be good. Obviously, early in the month, a month sneaks by fast. And so I just want to make sure But we'll keep you apprised if it's starting to take longer. But I think a lot of the things you asked for, we can provide that we already have, for example. But again, Mike is out till later this week, so we're kind of a little behind in some of his work too, so.
Do we want to just wait to hear from Mike and Casey and then send out a doodle poll?
Well, I'm thinking
rather than going through the
Yeah.
work here and finding out it's not going to work for other people.
Well, I can, if you want to do that, I'm just thinking, as you look to April, if there are some days that we should avoid, if that would be helpful. If you know there are days in April you'd like us to avoid, that would be helpful as well. And we'll start there and then come back out.
Okay.
So any dates that you look at your calendars and say, I'm going to be gone here or what have you.
I'm gone from the 10th through the 20th.
All right, that's helpful.
Not very, but.
No, but I mean, at least we know that, so then we'll avoid those dates. Other dates?
The 7th is election day.
That probably isn't a great day then.
Also the day after, I wouldn't do that day either.
7th, 8th off.
Okay. Michelle, how much time are you looking at another kind of full day?
I don't think. I'm not thinking that much. I'm thinking an evening, 3 hour probably would do it. Bring forward, get more board direction, have you say yes, no, look deeper at this. So I would think we could accomplish what we need in 3 hours. Okay.
Yeah, I think that works once you have Casey and Mike's schedules.
Okay. Yep, and as long as there's nothing else that you absolutely know you won't be there, just let us know. All right.
Anything else?
It's great, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. So that concludes our organizational support work session. And now we're going to go back into closed session, so I'll read this full thing. That's what I'm doing? Okay, awesome. Do I have to do the recommended motions or just start here, Katie? Okay, cool. I'm learning. I move that the board reconvenes in closed session in room 337 pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal problems or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where Part B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect on the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, to wit, report of a policy violation, investigation regarding a school board member, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, deliberation of the new superintendent contract. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. We'll convene across the hall. Okay.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.